I'm gonna draw your mom.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. A second look at former champion Miyo Yoshida's recent announcement that reads, I would like to formally announce that I have officially concluded my promotional agreement with DeBella Entertainment. I am truly grateful for the opportunities and experiences and everything I have learned during that time. Keith Sullivan will continue to serve as my boxing manager, and TMA Management New York has joined my team as a business advisor. A new chapter begins now. I am fully focused on what lies ahead. The IBF has ordered undisputed bantamweight champion Shernika Johnson to defend her titles against me, the division's #1 ranked fighter. I look forward to regaining the world title again. In my previous video, we talked about the potentiality of the fight happening, whether or not it's feasible, it being that Dina Thorslund, she's with MVP just like Shernika Johnson. She wants her crack at the apple. She wants a chance to win her belts back. Except that she's not Shernika Johnson's mandatory challenger. Miyo Yoshida is. So on the predication that the multi-weight champion actually gets Shernika Johnson in the ring, what is that fight going to look like? Because it might happen. Shernika Johnson sports a professional record of 19 wins with 2 losses and no draws, 8 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 21 professional bouts, having been a champion at 2 weights, at Super Bantam and now at Bantam. Whereas Miyo Yoshida, the former champion, sports a professional record of 18 wins with 5 losses and no draws, no recorded knockouts, having never been knocked out in 23 professional bouts, last in action about a year ago, opposite the ring Beata Dudek, who she decisioned over 8 rounds. And in between then and now, Miyo actually returned to her kickboxing roots, making a brief appearance in a kickboxing match that she won, so she hasn't been completely inactive. About 37 years old, having been a champion at 2 weights just like Shernika, Miyo used to hold the WBO at 115 pounds, and very briefly, she held the IBF at 118. What are the odds that at this advanced age, she can pry all the alphabet titles away from Shernika Johnson? Slim pickings. Entertaining the possibility that Miyo gets what she wants, gets that fight with Shernika Johnson. What is that fight gonna look like? Well, Miyo Yoshida is a slugger, a characteristically aggressive fighter, likes to stay in the pocket, mid-range to inside, and pour the punches on. The problem with that is, Shernika likes to do that too. But Shernika is fresher, younger, faster. I would say she's stronger. She's the one with the recorded knockouts. Miyo, for all of her aggression, never forced a stoppage, never got a knockout. Shernika's got 8. 2 of which she racked up in her last 4 fights. Currently, she's on a 4-fight winning streak, and of the 4 girls that she fought, 2 of them she stopped. What those 2 fighters might have in common with Miyo Yoshida, ahead of a potential fight with Shernika, is they were both up there in age. You're talking about former champion Nina Hughes. You're talking about former champion Sharita Metcalf. They were both significantly older than Shernika Johnson, like Miyo Yoshida is significantly older than Shernika. That's a common theme on Shernika's resume. It's not said to disparage her. Put simply, it's just pattern recognition. She's already come across a good number of aging fighters, like Miyo Yoshida is an aging fighter, and the aesthetic of a fight between them would probably look a lot like Shernika's fight with Susie Ramadan some fights and some years ago. That was a bloodbath, and given that both Shernika and Miyo are close quarters fighters, there's a lot of potential for head clashes. There's a lot of potential for cuts. Of course there is. Shernika Johnson gets cut in almost every other fight. So in a fight with Miyo, I expect the same could happen, but I also expect that Shernika Johnson would overpower her, outfight her, outdog her, mid-range to inside. That if Miyo wants to do is get into a gunfight, Shernika's got the bigger guns. For me, it's just a question of does Shernika beat her on points or does she force a stoppage? Because Miyo Yoshida has never been stopped. But there is a first time for everything. There is potential for the fight to happen because Miyo Yoshida would present to Shernika a more beatable opponent than former unified champion Dina Thorslund. That Thorslund fight, that's a dangerous fight. That doesn't offer Shernika much of an incentive to have it. It's the very best fight to make at 118 pounds, but in terms of quality, in terms of caliber, character, but in terms of marquee value, Dina Thorslund is about as well known as Miyo Yoshida. If Shernika Johnson went her whole career having not fought Dina, a lot of people wouldn't notice.
I'm not saying I don't want her to. I, as a boxing fan, want to see Dina get a crack at the apple. The problem is I don't know if she's going to, because she is dangerous. And because she's not actually one of Shernika Johnson's mandatory challengers. Miyo Yoshida is. Miyo has a right to fight for those belts.
And she may yet get the chance. We'll see.
How do you think UFC fighters will be feeling seeing the figures?
Sick as a dog. Sick as a
Eight-figure
dog.
deal.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a UFC fighter, you're looking at this Zuffa going, what the fuck? I'm being absolutely ripped off here. I'm generating more revenue than these guys, and I'm getting a tenth of the money. But listen, there's no loyalty in that game. Look at Aspinall. I mean, he gets his eyes gouged out, and he just gets humiliated by UFC, and basically told everyone he's a liar and he's a pussy. You know what I mean? This is a cutthroat business.
Would seem that Eddie Hearns' initial reaction to Conor Benn signing to Zuffa based on what he stands to make over there for just one fight.
15 mil.
Time has proven him right, that UFC fighters under Dana are going to catch wind of Conor Benn's purse for what is just one fight, and they're going to be livid. They're going to lose it. Now, of course, you can rationalize it. You can make it make sense. The UFC as an organization are not also backed by the WWE and Sella, Turkey El Sheikh, that there's actually a lot more money behind Zuffa than there is behind just the UFC. And overall, there's always been more money behind boxing than mixed martial arts.
But that's not going to stop the mixed martial arts guys from complaining, from crying about it. I just saw Sean O'Malley.
The association that they're making is that the same guy that pays me is also paying Conor Benn. So why is Conor getting so much more than I am?
Is that, it's, for me, it's so hard to believe just because, like, I did see it, I heard it, I've been told, Tim told me, did you see that? I'm like, that doesn't mean it's true. I don't know. It could very well be true. I can't imagine it being true. Zuffa Boxing, it's like they're paying out. I don't even know who Conor Benn is.
I don't know.
He like supposedly is a pretty big name in boxing. But I never heard of him. Yeah, they really paid this Ben. Is Ben Johns?
Conor
Ben. Whatever.
Conor Benn.
They really, Ben Jones used to be a UFC fighter. They really paid him $15 million. It's like,
I wouldn't blame you for going to box.
Yeah, it's crazy how you just put in so much work in the UFC, to build this name, create this character, be this star, you know, and it's like, I'm not making fucking $15 million fight.
Yeah.
But it's also a business. If they think that's a good business move and that guy's going to bring in money, it's like, I get it. I don't take anything personal in business. Business is.
And, you know, $15 million for one fight, it's crazy because what's going to happen after this fight, right? Is the $15 million worth having Conor Benn? It's the first time I've heard of him. From what everybody tells me, he's a very good boxer. But is Khamzat Chimaev making $15 million? Is Ilia Topuria making $15 million? Merab Dvalishvili making $15? We don't know because those numbers are always hidden. But I truly believe it's a flex from Dana White paying Conor Benn $15 million.
Sean O'Malley, guy with the fucked up hair, almost sounded like he was going to cry. Fucked up. When he heard what Conor Benn stood to make under Dana White's Zuffa Boxing, that the guys under Dana White's UFC aren't making anywhere near that money, but they're just as dedicated. Their sport is just as hard. Sean's problem is he doesn't realize their sport is not as big. The why would Sean and so many other MMA guys, MMA fans think that it is? They're under the impression that somehow mixed martial arts caught up to boxing. That sales pitch came from Dana White himself,
When it never really did.
back when it was Dana White's mission to usurp boxing as the premier combat sport. And marketing his UFC, you had a lot of MMA fighters and MMA fans running with that notion that was never actually true. In fact, I think mixed martial arts, the UFC in particular, has peaked in popularity. It's not growing, and it's not now where it was in the heyday of Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor.
Now, that doesn't mean that it's not marketable, profitable, because it is, though it's plateaued. It's not growing now at the same rate that it used to.
And it never usurped boxing as the premier combat sport because, put simply, mixed martial arts is still a fledgling sport, relatively new to the combat space compared to boxing that's got all these decades and all these eras, all of this history that MMA has yet to catch up to. Let's get more specific. You're wondering why Conor Benn, who you've never heard of, is making so much more than you are and other MMA fighters.
Neither Demetrius Johnson or Sean O'Malley were familiar with Conor Benn until news broke that he was going to make $15 million for a single fight. I'd wager Conor probably never heard of these guys either. What separates them?
You've never heard of Conor Benn. Conor Benn has probably never heard of you, but more people have heard of Conor Benn.
More people, more customers.
Than people have heard of you. One of the flaws in UFC's structure as an organization is they don't produce big box office draws and stars in the same abundance as boxing.
They just don't.
You tell me, what's the biggest fight you could put together in the UFC right now with the two biggest names, and how would that fight stack up with the biggest fight in boxing, the one that would generate the most?
It's not even close.
In Conor Benn's last two fights, he would have been seen by more people and generated more money, more overall, earned more than Sean O'Malley and Demetrius Johnson combined.
Because boxing is a bigger sport, and MMA never actually caught up to it. That was just propaganda
that a lot of people with a lot of latent homosexual tendencies latched onto because they wanted to believe that MMA would replace boxing as the premier combat sport, but it never did. Take a look around. Boxing comes on more platforms than mixed martial arts. Take a look around. You're talking about DAZN, Amazon Prime, Paramount. It could be back on ESPN if Top Rank and them iron out a new deal.
And that's just in the United States. That's not counting foreign markets like what's going on in Japan and what's going on in Australia, all the Latin American countries, the European countries,
the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, Spain. Boxing is a bigger sport worldwide, and it always was. So it's no wonder that a guy who's not really even a top-level boxer can end up making that much more boxing than a top-level UFC fighter, because that's always been the case.
Penis envy.
MMA fighters and MMA fans alike have always harbored this jealousy towards boxing, and I think that's what really fuels it, the disparity in pay. To the extent that for a long time they felt that MMA fighters were better fighters than boxers overall, that boxing is very simple and limited.
Okay, then you do it.
Go on. You're an ultimate fighter. You're the ultimate, so adapting to boxing for you should be relatively easy, except that it's not. And what's the proof?
The disparity in pay.
That's what really drives the point home. That's what makes it more obvious that, buddy, if you're supposed to be the ultimate, why aren't you boxing? It pays more.
Oh, that's the question. Here's the answer.
You're not the ultimate, even though you'd like to think that. The reality of it is, if you could box, you would box, because you'd make more money. And what Dana White and the Furtado brothers did with the UFC is corner the market on fighters who can't make it as boxers but still want to fight.
Make a living as fighters.
Though still lacking the ingredients to make a living as a professional boxer, a respectable boxer competing at a respectable level. They can't do that, because if they could, they would. So now it's not uncommon to see what are supposed to be top-level MMA fighters bellyaching about what boxers make. If it's so fucking easy, you get in there and do it.
They can't.
Conor Benn isn't actually a top-level boxer because he hasn't proven that. He never won a world title at any weight that he's fought. But boxing being what it is, he still makes more than a high-level UFC fighter. The guys competing at the highest levels of the UFC don't make the kind of money Conor makes.
And it's because they can't.
What's stopping you from going into boxing and earning those kinds of purses? You don't have what it takes to make it as a boxer. A lot of people don't. The MMA fighters don't want to admit that.
It feels too much like defeat.
For them, it feels like boxing is the more difficult sport. Though there may be something to that, because once again, if you could make it as a boxer, you would, because it pays better. The reason you don't is because you can't.
Boxing!
One is that, how damn good is Ryan? Because he apparently wasn't really serious in training camps and was just showing up and just being so talented that he was able to get where he was and just went back to relied on the left hook because it worked. I'm knocking guys out. I always have this thing in my back pocket because this time he actually showed up. And he brought all the skills. He brought his entire tool bag with him, and he used everything. And that's the thing. And we talk about this on this show quite a bit. Ryan had a very good amateur background. He is not a YouTuber turned boxer. He is a boxer. He was
turned influencer.
Right,
yes,
right, exactly.
Start the other way.
Granted, he made money before he was champion, which is the opposite of how it normally goes. But the skills were there. The fundamentals were there. And he put them all on display. For me, Saturday night was him just living up to his potential. there's been so much hype and about this kid because of his potential, his star power, but also he had all the skills too. He fought Devin Haney like 6 times in the amateurs. You know, he fought Shakur Stevenson. Those are high-level guys, and he brought those skills with him. But for me though, it was the fact that he was consistent all night long. He was able to do that for 12 rounds. 12 rounds is a long time, and he stayed sharp, stayed smart all night long. Granted, champ, to your point, Barris,
music all night long. He was in rhythm.
You know, I like Chris. I respect him as a fighter, as a man, and as a friend. He doesn't know you.
But what we're not going to do is turn Ryan Garcia beating Mario Barrios into some sort of prophecy that got fulfilled, that now Ryan is living up to his potential because he was so consistent.
You kidding me?
Is it that he was so consistent, or is it that Mario Barrios is so consistently shit? I don't expect fighters to talk about other fighters same way that we do, because they're always going to have this veneration for their compatriots, for their fellow boxers, but I think that causes them to look at things with blinders on. Mario ain't no good. He's lost every step-up fight he's ever had. The one with Gervonta, the other one with Keith Thurman. This is a guy who is coming off of 2 back-to-back draws with a journeyman in Abel Ramos and a senior citizen in Manny Pacquiao. So how good do you really have to be to beat him?
Ryan shouldn't even have that title because he didn't earn that opportunity, beating Mario.
That is just the byproduct of chicanery from the WBC and special favors, because they want to capitalize off of his popularity, so they'll do what they have to do to put a title in his hands. In effect, suppressing what other ranked contenders might have also beat Mario Barrios if they got the same opportunity that Ryan got.
That's what the WBA is doing right now. Look at Shakram Giasov. He's been the mandatory challenger to that belt since Stanionis had it, but he has yet to get his crack at the apple.
Rolly's got it now. And if you put Shakram Giasov in the ring with Rolly, I promise you, not only does he beat Rolly, he knocks him out. But if the fight hasn't been made yet, it's because the WBA don't want to make it. They figure the same thing about Rolly that the WBC figures about Ryan. If we give him the belt, we make more money.
Giving rise to what is by and large the worst, the weakest era of welterweights I've ever seen. Ryan's got a belt, Rolly's got a belt.
So to now hear Chris Algieri, of all people, who has competed as both a boxer and a kickboxer, lavishing praise on Brian Garcia
for beating Mario?
Pardon me while I try not to throw up in my own mouth. Mario Barrios is not the benchmark for what constitutes elitism in today's welterweight division in boxing. Mario Barrios is a fighter.
You know, I don't even like Ryan, and I picked him to win that fight.
Not because Ryan is so good, but because Mario is so shit. There are a lot of guys at welterweight that would have did the same or worse to that same Mario Barrios. I think there were some guys at 140 that would have beat Mario Barrios. There were a lot of guys.
They beat him.
Now Joe Goosen, who quote-unquote trained Mario for this fight, is calling for him to move up to junior middle, move up to 154. What do you think is going to happen to him up there? Not all boxers were created equal. That's the truth of it. Some are better than others, and some are a lot better than others.
Some are a lot worse. That's Mario.
That's the truth, and it ain't pretty.